I'm Educator Emily with ZooMontana, and welcome to today's little education module. Today we are going to be talking about animal senses and the adaptations that some animals have that allow them to heavily rely on some of these senses, in some ways a lot more than we do. As I'm sure many of you guys know, we do have 5 senses, alright? We've got sight, we got smell, hearing, touch, and taste. Some creatures, they rely on one sense a lot more than the others, and in some cases they might not even have one sense altogether, alright? So they've got to make up for the lack of that with superpower sense. Which senses they use and which senses they rely on depend on the animal's ecology, or their Umwelt, which is basically a fancy naturalist word for how an animal perceives its environment, alright? So we're going to perceive our environment a lot differently than, say, a great horned owl, which we will be talking about later on in today's module. So in this program, we're going to be talking about each sense individually, breaking down how it works, and then talking about the animal that relies on it for its own survival, and how that works and how it uses it. We are going to be tying it back to humans, alright, in the end, so it's not going to be all on animals, and that's not super foreign to us. So we are going to learn a little bit about our own senses in this module as well. My bubble letters aren't the most beautiful, but I gave them polka dots. Aren't they cute? Basically, a sense of smell is just your ability to perceive odors in your environment. Okay, so we like to think that our sense of smell is pretty good, but it's simply not the best, all right? The animals that have the best sense of smell are predators, like dogs and cats, and they need this smell to be able to track down their prey. It's actually a dog right here. In this part of the module, we're going to be talking about smell, talking about the domestic dog and why the domestic dog's sense of smell is as amazing as it is. Right, so why did we pick dogs? Dogs have an amazing nose. They have an amazing sniffer, all right? And this is why we use them to find missing persons. We use them to sniff out illicit substances at airports. We use them to hunt with, right? You've got your tracking dogs. And biologists actually also use them to help them find animals by looking for their poop. So there's this really cool organization called Conservation Canines. I'll link them below. But they train dogs to work with these biologists to smell things, poop. And there's one dog who smells orca poop in the water. It can smell it from up to a mile away. So their sense of smell it blows my mind. So what makes this dog able to smell the orca poop? All right, their sense of smell is 10,000 to 100,000 times better than ours. For all intents and purposes, let's just say their sense of smell is on the lower end. 10,000 times better than ours. That's also still kind of difficult to grasp. Let's put it in terms of sight. Let's say that I can see another friend. I see my friend about 1/3 of a mile away. The dog would be able to see that person from 3,000 miles away and see them as well as I can from 1/3 of a mile away. So that kind of puts it in perspective how well their sense of smell is compared to ours. It's leaps and bounds ahead of ours. What makes their sense of smell that amazing and that good? So this is a plastic replica of a domestic dog skull, okay? This is what we're going to be using to explore the super senses of smelling that dogs have. These guys, in their nose, they have about 300 million olfactory receptors, and olfactory is just a fancy word for smell. They have about 300 million of these in their nose. We have 6 million. So there's a huge disparity between the power of our nose and the power of their nose. Not only do they have all of these olfactory receptors that we lack, but when a dog inhales, the air actually becomes a little specialized. So when we inhale, all of it just goes up our nose. The olfactory receptors send whatever we're smelling, send those signals to our brain, and that's it. When a dog inhales, the air kind of becomes compartmentalized or specialized. So part of the air it inhales will go to its body to, oxygenate the blood vessels and the muscles and the organs and all that kind of stuff. Part of it is going to be devoted solely to smelling what is there, okay? Our nose doesn't do that. It's just up one path and out the same path. Whereas the dog's nose actually splits the air into 2, one for smelling and one for body functions. We don't even do that. And that extra step allows them to really understand what's going on in their environment. So the olfactory receptors in our noses and in dogs' noses lie in these bony membrane structures called the nasal turbinates. Every organism has these nasal turbinates, all right? And we're actually gonna use this dog skull to look at them. what you're looking at, the things that kind of look spongy, those are the nasal turbinates in this dog. So what would be in front of that nasal turbinate, that little spongy membrane stuff, is the perfectly boopable snoot that we know. So there are olfactory receptors within these nasal turbinates, and what they do is they separate smells by chemical structure. These olfactory receptors in the nasal turbinates will filter those out, and that way that tells your brain that I am smelling new paper and freshly cut grass and a baked blueberry muffin. So dogs also have this second superpower that allows them to smell so well. They have this thing called the vomeronasal organ, or Jacobson's organ. Either one works. And humans actually lack this altogether. We don't have one at all. No primate does. In dogs, the vomeronasal organ resides right above the maxilla, or the upper jaw. So it hangs out right about here. If you've ever seen a dog or a cat kind of curl their lips back like this, and sniff and look around and be very focused, that means that they're trying to take in information into this Jacobson's organ. What does this Jacobson's organ do? Why is it so important? All animals give off pheromones, all right? And these pheromones are different than smells. They tell different things about the organism. The Jacobson's organ is specialized to pick up these chemical compounds, or pheromones. And so it's kind of like it has its own special olfactory computer that is completely separate of the nose. So, to recap, why can dogs smell so well? All right, so first, they compartmentalize the air that they breathe in, right? You've got one that is devoted towards olfaction and smelling, and one path that is devoted to giving the body oxygen. 2, they have these nasal turbinates with high levels of olfactory receptors. And 3, they have the Jacobson's or vomeronasal organ, something that humans lack altogether. So, if pitted in a sniffing contest against a dog, unfortunately, we would almost always lose. All right, next sense. Let's talk a little bit about hearing. So when we think of hearing, and when we think about what animals have amazing hearing, we're going to think about animals that have very obvious ears. So animals including us, maybe the cat or the dog that we have at home. Or we think of animals that have absolutely huge ears, like an elephant or the long-eared jerboa, which is this guy. And he actually has the largest ears to body ratio in the animal kingdom. In this part of the module, we're not going to be talking about an animal that has extremely obvious ears. We're actually going to be talking about the dolphin today. While dolphins have pretty good eyesight, they rely heavily on their sense of hearing for navigation, identifying other dolphins, and hunting. Dolphins emit a series of high-pitched, rapid clicks known as sonar and echolocation. They use these clicks to figure out their surroundings. So while the dolphin has 2 very tiny ears, they're located right behind the eyes, they're very hard to see. It does have those ears. It doesn't use those ears for hearing when it's underwater. Those little ear holes, they're basically useless. Instead, when it's underwater, it's so weird. The dolphin hears through its jaw. All right, let's break this down. How do they hear through their jaw? What on earth is happening? All right, so let's start by talking about echolocation and how that works. So echolocation is a series of high-pitched, rapid clicks, all right? And the dolphin produces these clicks in its melon, which is its forehead. It produces these clicks in its melon. Those clicks then go out into the environment, and then they come back. And all sound is vibrations or sound waves. So I've drawn like a high-pitched sound wave here at the top, and a lower pitched sound wave at the bottom. And these sound waves, they travel through the environment until they hit something. When they hit something, you get an echo. The echo that's produced by the sound waves that the dolphin sends out through echolocation allow it to create a sound map of its surroundings in its head. So to explain it, I'm gonna try and do it a little bit differently and see if it makes a little bit more sense if you're still confused. Okay, so imagine, for the purposes of this video, that both of these are tennis balls. And I'm going to throw these tennis balls the exact same direction, the exact same time, and the exact same speed. So I throw these tennis balls. One of these tennis balls hits an obstacle in its way, right? It hits the chair in the middle of my living room. The other tennis ball, it keeps going. It keeps going till it hits the wall on the other side of this room. The chair is closer than the wall, all right? But when both of these tennis balls bounce off the surfaces that they hit, they're going to come right back to me. But what ball is going to return to me sooner? The ball that hit the wall or the ball that hit the chair? The ball that's going to come to me first is the ball that hit the chair, and then the ball that hit the wall is going to come back to me. And so, me, as the dolphin, is going to be able to be like, okay, cool. There are two obstacles in my way. One is a lot closer than the other, but there are two and they're coming up. And let's say, for the purpose of this, that the distance between the echo of the sound wave that hit the chair and the echo of the sound wave that hit the wall tell the dolphin they're about 5 feet apart. This information would allow me to successfully navigate any murky water that I'm in by telling me where things are so that I don't run into them. That's cool and all. We understand how echolocation works, but how on earth is a dolphin even hearing through its jaw? All right, so sound is just vibrations. All right, so when these sound waves come back, they hit the dolphin's lower jaw and they cause the jaw to vibrate. Specifically, they cause these fatty deposits in their lower jaw to vibrate. These fatty deposits conduct those vibrations and help channel them to the inner ear bones of the dolphin. The vibration of those inner ear bones is then perceived as sound. A similar process happens in us, except the sound waves enter into our ear and they vibrate our eardrums directly. There's no secondary medium that they have to go through. Now that we've discussed how hearing works in dolphins, let's talk about how better it is than ours. We humans can hear sounds between 20 hertz, which is a very low, deep bass, and about 20 kilohertz, which is the high-pitched, excruciating sound of a dog whistle. And some people can't even hear that. With dog whistles, actually, the younger you are, the more likely you are to be able to hear them, and you lose that as you get older. Dolphins have a range of about 20 hertz, but they can hear up into the ranges of 150 kilohertz. Basically, that means they can hear 7 times better than we can. Now, another group of animals also in the ocean use the sound to communicate and navigate, and these are the whales. But unlike the dolphins, they navigate and communicate using sounds in like these lower frequency ranges, and this allows the sounds to travel for hundreds of thousands of miles. We're not going to talk about them here in this module, but I think it's insanely cool that you have two ocean species that navigate very similarly, but just in completely different opposite ranges of the frequency spectrum. Dolphins are up here in the higher frequencies, and whales are down here in the lower frequencies, using very similar mechanisms. To talk about sight, we are going to view it through the eyes of a great horned owl, which is the skull that I'm holding in my hand right here. Owl species in general are the kings and queens of night vision. And it's very obvious why, just looking at the skull of this great horned owl. Look at those eye sockets, all right? They take up a huge majority of the front of that animal's skull. Now, if you just look at my face, my eyes take up a very small amount of my skull. So maybe my vision isn't going to be as good as the great horned owls. Surprise, it's really bad compared to the great horned owls. So for a eye to body ratio, great horned owls actually have the largest eyes in the animal kingdom, and it's these large eyes that really allow them to see extremely well at night. Their eyes are also cylindrical in their sockets. They're not circular like ours are, and we'll talk more about that a little bit later on. I can move my eyes side to side as much as I want. I can go like this for days, and it's super fun, and it might give you a little headache. I can even cross my eyes. Wow. His eyes are fixed in his skull. He can't move them around. So the owl has this super cool adaptation where it can rotate its head around up to 270 degrees to get a comprehensive view of its surroundings. Let's first break down the anatomy of an eye. So the parts of the eye that we're going to be talking about today that are applicable, we're going to be talking about the pupil, which is the black hole in the middle of the iris, or the colored part of the eye. And then we're going to be talking about the retinas, rods, and cones. And these parts aren't visual that we can see. They're inside of our eyes. So your pupil is what allows light to come into your eye. When there's lots of light, your pupils will be smaller. When there is a lack of light, your pupils are going to dilate or get bigger. All right, we're also going to be talking about the lens, which is inside your eye, and that helps to focus the light onto the retina, which is the back of your eye. The retina takes the light and converts that light into neural impulses to send to your brain via the optic nerve to tell your brain what you are seeing. We also have rods and cones in our eyes. Cones are responsible for seeing color, and rods are responsible for black and white, or grayscale vision. So back to our owl. Remember how I said the owl, the great horned owl specifically, has the biggest eyes in the animal kingdom? These big eyes allow the pupils to dilate at night to get as big as they possibly can, all right? So big eyes equals big pupils, which equals a lot of light that can enter into the owl's eye. I also mentioned earlier that their eyes are kind of cylindrical, all right? And this is kind of thought to be, to give maximum amount of space between the pupil, the lens, and the retina to allow for maximum focus. So once that light in the owl's eye has hit the lens and hit the retina is going to send messages to the brain via the optic nerve to tell the owl what it is seeing. Not only does having large eyes allow the pupils of the owls to expand as big as they can to allow as much light into the eye as possible, it also has to do with the rods and cones in their eyes. So like I said, cones are responsible for color vision. Great horned owls are mainly crepuscular, so they're hunting mostly at dawn and dusk. There's not a lot of light during these times of day, so owls actually don't need color vision. They have little to no cones in their eyes. Instead, they have a lot of rods, or the parts of the eye that are designated for black and white and grayscale vision. So, the more rods an animal has, the better it's going to be able to see at night, all right, or in low light situations. Owls have a bunch of rods. Because of this, they have amazing night vision. They can spot a mouse from up to a football field away. If you were to light a candle, just one candle, and place it in the middle of a dark football stadium, that would be enough light for the owl to successfully hunt and find a single mouse in that whole football stadium. There is a catch, however. Owl's eyesight is solely movement-based, so it's triggered by an organism or something moving from one place to another. This means an owl could be looking directly at a mouse, but if the mouse is sitting still, the owl is not going to recognize that as prey or something it should pounce on. But the minute that that mouse moves or twitches its ear or moves its tail, the owl is going to hyper-focus onto that mouse, and all of those senses in the eye, the pupil, the lens, the retina, the optic nerve, all the way to the brain, are going to be working at hyper speed to tell the owl, hey, you need to pounce here to get this mouse. Now, there's actually a super cool activity that you can do at home yourself to simulate what it might be like to be an owl. You only need a couple of materials. You need a candle, a lighter to light the candle, a dark room, and yourself. Go into your dark room, all right, and you're gonna be in there for about 5 minutes, so make sure that you're comfortable. Once you're there, go ahead and light your candle. Once your candle is lit, pick an eye. It does not matter which one, but I want you to not only close it, but I also want you to cover it. And I want you to keep that eye closed and covered for the remainder of this until I tell you to uncover it. With the eye that's open, I want you to focus on the flame of that candle in that dark room, okay? For the 3 to 5 minutes, you can pass the time by telling a story, listening to your favorite song, or talking to your friend or family about their day if they want to do this with you. After those 3 to 5 minutes are up, you can blow out the candle. Once you have blown out the candle, you can uncover and open your eye. Look around that dark room with both of your eyes open. You should see a huge difference between what you can see with the eye that's been open the whole time and the eye that you've had covered. You should be able to see a lot well with the eye that you've had covered this whole time. That might be what an owl sees at night. It's a little salt shaker. All right, so our fourth sense that we are talking about is taste. Now, it's very difficult to measure taste in other animals, and so for this part of the module, we are going to be talking about our own taste, which means we're talking about a tongue! Yay! So there are 5 perceptions of taste: sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and umami, or savory. They are all picked up by taste receptors, which are inside of our taste buds, which are little ridges that you can see on your tongue. It's these taste receptors that are also responsible for why things like hot, spicy peppers taste spicy or feel hot, and why things like mint, so methanol and like your spearmint gum, why that is perceived as cold. These taste receptors are extremely important, not only for everyday life, but in our evolution as a species. So taste buds are important because, yeah, they tell us what tastes great and what we love, but they also alert us to things that could potentially harm us or things that are poisonous and toxic. Lots of things that are poisonous and toxic, particularly plants, have a very bitter taste when they are ingested or put in our mouth. Even with things that aren't toxic, like lemons, we dislike this taste so much that when we are first exposed to it, we spit it out. And throughout our evolution as a species, those bitter things have meant bad. The way that some people taste things is actually determined by genetics. We're going to talk about the reason why cilantro tastes like soap. So cilantro is also called coriander. You can use both. Just figured I'd put both terms out there in case there's people watching this video who use one or the other. And it's a popular herb used all over the world, from Central American to Indian cuisine. It's used everywhere. And people, for the most part, really love cilantro. It's one of those things that is extremely polarizing. You either love it or you hate it. And a lot of people that hate it, they complain that it tastes like soap. So cilantro tastes like soap to people like me because it has these things called aldehydes in its leaves. These aldehydes are soapy flavored, and they're really only detectable by some people. The people who can detect these soapy aldehydes very, very well actually have a gene that allows them to pick up these tastes. And these genes are present in the olfactory receptors, so I'm sure a lot of you know or have figured out that lots of tastes are influenced by smells. So you can say that you are tasting a really gross smell, like you can almost taste gasoline when you smell it. People with this soap gene pick up really heavily on these soapy aldehydes in the leaves of the cilantro plant, and then when they ingest it, put it in their mouth, it's just this overwhelmingly sudsy, nasty taste, and it's overwhelming and really gross, but only a small percentage of the population has this gene. And people in places like Central America and India, where this herb is very present in their cuisine, you actually find very low levels of this gene in those populations, which might explain why in certain regions of the world, this is such a widely used and widely loved plant. Alright, let's talk about our tongues. The human tongue has about 4,000 taste buds, which is actually a fair amount of taste buds considering how small our tongue is relative to the rest of all of our body. So in humans, we don't have taste buds on our elbows, we don't have taste buds on our knees or on our feet. They're only on our tongue, which means we have one specialized teeny tiny little part of our body that tastes. But there are some animals, like the catfish, that actually have taste buds all over their entire body. These guys can have between 100,000 and 175,000 taste buds, depending on the size of the catfish. Obviously, the larger the catfish, the more space there is for these taste buds, and the more taste buds that they are going to have. What the heck? Why don't we have taste buds on our body? Catfish live in very murky waters, and so it's very difficult for them to rely on their eyesight to find food. So why don't they just echolocate like dolphins? Well, catfish, they didn't evolve to be able to do that. They don't have that ability, right? So they can't use sound and they can't use sight. So instead, to fix this problem, they have taste buds all over their entire body, and this actually allows them to pick up on trace amounts of food in the water, and they know where to go based on where they can taste, not quotes, they taste it. They taste this food on their tail, on their head, on their lips, wherever. So it allows them to pick up on trace amounts of food throughout their aquatic environment. Having taste buds all over their body are extremely crucial to catfish for them to be able to navigate their environment successfully. Scientists have actually found that if a catfish has damaged taste buds for any reason, it actually has a much more difficult time finding food and thus surviving. I would love to be able to taste all over my body for just one day. Just one day. I think it would be so cool. Maybe it'd be horrible, but just for one day, have taste buds all over my entire body. That would be the coolest thing. I want to know! Alright y'all, so we have come to the end of our module, and we're going to be wrapping it up talking about touch, and specifically talking about touch in us humans. Touch is a very important sense to us. In fact, it might be the most important sense to us. We are constantly touching things. It might not seem like it, but if you're sitting down, your back is probably touching the back of the chair, your feet are probably touching the floor, your skin all over your body is touching the clothes that you're wearing, and you don't even realize it. You are always touching everything. We're always using this sense. So we sense touch through our skin, which is the largest organ on our body. And this is really unique compared to our other senses, right, that are fairly localized, and the sense organs are a lot smaller, like our nose, our eyes, our ears, and our tongue. This is our entire body. It's the only sense that we have over our whole body. Touch can convey a lot of things. It can convey pain, it can convey temperature, but it can also help to calm us down, right? Like a nice squeeze, a nice hug, right? That can be very, very a calming sensation. So touch means a lot to us in our world. So how does this differ from all of our other senses? We can kind of mimic what it would maybe be like to not have eyesight or not be able to smell or hear. We can't really turn the ability to touch off. So it's very difficult to imagine what a life without touch would be like. But because the skin is our largest organ in the body, covering us from quite literally head to toe, we're able to touch and feel touch with every single square inch, square centimeter, square millimeter of our skin. To understand how touch works, we need to talk a little bit more about our skin. So I'm going to put up a little diagram. I don't know what side it's going to pop up on. The layer on top is called the epidermis, all right? This is the layer of the skin that we can see. It's made up primarily of dead skin cells and helps to form the waterproof layer that prevents things from getting into our body that aren't supposed to. It also does have very fine and sensitive touch receptors in this layer. Below the epidermis, you have the dermis, all right? And this kind of has a little bit of everything. It has oil glands, it has hair follicles, it has a bunch of nerve endings for these touch receptors. We have 4 kinds of touch receptors, and these are specialized for their own separate functions, all right? So we have our thermoreceptors, and those sense hot and cold, and those kick in at different times, so they're not functioning all the time. They're not running full speed 24/7. So our cold receptors kick in when our skin temperature dips below 95 degrees Fahrenheit, and then they completely stop functioning once the skin temperature hits 41 degrees. So this is why if you've ever stuck your hands or your feet into a bucket of ice water, that you eventually lose feeling. It's because those thermoreceptors are telling your brain, hey, this is cold. They've completely stopped firing and sending that message to your brain. Your heat receptors, they kick in at temperatures above 86 degrees Fahrenheit, and they tell your body that it is sensing the sensation of heat. Your heat receptors stop functioning at around 113 degrees Fahrenheit, and at that point, your pain receptors kick in. And our pain receptors do exactly what they sound like they do. They tell our body when it's registering pain. And the reason it kicks in at this temperature and kind of takes over from the heat receptors is because at that temperature level, you are really starting to become in danger of getting harmed. And so your pain receptors are there to kind of kick in and tell the brain, hey, we need to get out of whatever situation we're in that's causing these to start firing. And pain receptors don't only function in that regard, as I'm sure many of you guys know. If you scrape your knee when you're falling down riding your bicycle, if you stub your toe on the table, right, those are also your pain receptors kicking in and sending that message to your brain that something isn't quite right. Pain receptors are also responsible for dulling pain as an injury heals. So like if you notice the first day that you scrape your knee after riding your bike, it really, really hurts, but on like day 3 or 4, it hurts, but it's not nearly as painful. And that's because your pain receptors are dulling the pain in that region as the body heals and gets better. The other 2 touch receptors that we have are mechanoreceptors and proprioceptors. So when someone comes to give you a big hug and they squeeze you really tight, maybe after not seeing them for a really long time, and you kind of feel the pressure of their body, those are your mechanoreceptors firing and telling your brain that I am feeling pressure from this person, right? From their hug. At these points on my body, like your arms or your shoulders. Mechanoreceptors are also responsible for texture, so if you've ever ran your hand over a shaggy carpet, or even like your dog, or some sandpaper, or textured wallpaper, right, and you feel the bumps there, those are your mechanoreceptors telling you what you are feeling. The last kind of touch receptor that we have is the proprioceptor, and those are kind of responsible for telling parts of your body where they are in relation to each other. So they are located a lot in your muscles and your tendons and your joints. So when you're working out, right, and you're trying to touch your toes and you kind of feel that stretch, that uncomfortable stretch in the back of your hamstrings, those are your proprioceptors firing to tell your brain that my muscles are being stretched, I don't know what's going on. But this is also responsible for just what allows you to move. So without these proprioceptors, you wouldn't be able to dance, you wouldn't be able to walk, or all of these fun things. While these receptors are all throughout our bodies, right, you can feel everything from like the tip of your head to your pinky toe. So these receptors are all throughout our bodies. They're not evenly distributed throughout our bodies. So like I'm not gonna have the same amount of touch receptors in my fingertip as I am like my big toe or my knee. So my touch receptors aren't evenly spaced throughout my body, and nor are yours, and that's how it's supposed to be. Like the dolphins kind of made this sound map of their environment, our brain has a sensory map or a touch map of our whole body inside of it, and this map is very disproportionate. So in this map, things like our hands, our lips, our tongue, and our feet are bigger or more represented than like our belly button or our elbow or our neck. And this is because parts of your body, like your hands, your lips, and your tongue, they have a lot more of these touch receptors, all 4 types, a lot more of these touch receptors than your belly button or the backs of your knees or the back of your neck. So why is it that these touch receptors are unevenly spaced or unevenly balanced throughout our entire body? Why is it not beneficial to have the same amount of touch receptors all the way from your head to your toes? Well, think about how you explore your world, right? If you come across something that you have never seen before or that is new to you, the first thing that you're going to want to do after you look at it is you're going to want to touch it. And when you go to touch it, you're going to grab it with your hands. And if you're a baby, you're going to continue to explore it by putting it in your mouth. You're not going to try to explore something with your belly button or like the back of your knee. That's kind of odd. Okay, so you're going to explore your world with your hands. Humans and primates in general, so including our chimpanzee cousins and our gorilla cousins and our monkey cousins, we're all very tactile animals. We like to feel things, okay? And as a result of this, we're going to have the majority of our touch receptors that are going to sense these things in the parts of our body that are going to be grabbing things right away, okay? So it's going to be in your hands. So I was talking a little bit about how like I'm going to have more touch receptors in my fingertips than I am going to have in, say, like, I don't know, pick a body part. My nose. Sure, my nose. I'm going to have more receptors in my fingertips than I am in my nose. In each of your fingertips, so in all 10 of your fingertips, you have 3,000 touch receptors in your thumb, 3,000 in your pointer, and so on and so forth on each hand. 3,000 touch receptors in just each one of your fingertips. In your hands, in each hand individually has 100,000 touch receptors in it. So I got 100,000 in my left hand, 100,000 in my right hand, and then I have 3,000 touch receptors in each individual finger. That's a lot of nerve endings, that's a lot of touch receptors, that's a lot of different things to tell my brain that I'm touching this table, that I'm touching this pen, that I'm touching this piece of paper. It's a lot of different ways to get information all at the same time. As I mentioned earlier, we primates, we humans, are a tactile species. We love to explore our world by touching it. So that's why we have so many of these touch receptors localized in our hands. And they have to be able to tell our brain, like, milliseconds apart what they are feeling, so our brain can accurately and quickly respond to tell us, okay, I'm feeling this. Is this okay? Is this going to hurt me? What's going on in my outside world? So we need to have all of these different receptors in our hands to basically gather as much information as possible for our brain so that we can have an accurate representation of our world as we are exploring it. Alright y'all, that concludes our program for today. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope that you guys learned something today. ZooMontana is going to try to keep putting out online content like this, so please stay tuned in the future to see what else we put out here for you guys. Again, I am Educator Emily. Thank you so much for watching today and learning all about animal senses with me. I will see you next time.